Hey everyone, welcome to my molecular biochemistry series, and in this episode we are going to focus on genetics. And to distinguish this video from my previous video on gene expression and transcription, we are going to think about things at a higher level, the emergent properties or characteristics, traits, phenotypes that we can see as human beings and other human beings and animals is going to be the main idea of this video. Oftentimes we think about eye color, hair color, height, things, mutable characteristics such as these that are driven by our genes to understand genetics, and that's what will be the emphasis here today. In addition, if you have not, do visit my website, piazzaresearch.org, where you can gain a better understanding of what our mission is, which is to understand our place in the universe, whether that's in your local community, your local district, your house, your school, your neighborhood, or maybe at the state level if you're in the US, or maybe at the national level, your country and your government. But we are a global community. We all exist here on this single ball called Earth, and we interact in dynamic ways, more so than ever given technology. And we should also look towards the stars and see how our existence compares to the potential existence of life elsewhere, to gain a very firm understanding of our place in the universe. But with that, I will focus back on genetics. And to do that, we are going to look at a specific gene as an example. And that gene is the cystic fibrosis gene, or CFTR. And like we learned in the previous video, you have a promoter region, you have your coding region with exons and introns that are going to be spliced out, and then you have a polyadenylation sequence at the end to signal the poly A tail to be formed from the mRNA. Now, within the coding region, it can be broken up into something we call alleles, and these are fundamental and useful to understand to make a model like genetics make sense. So an allele is in the coding region, but you can have different alleles which indicate mutations or changes in the nucleotides within that exon. So you can have a Q allele, as we see here, and this expresses a specific phenotype or trait that we can see manifested in our lives, such as, like I said, eye color or height, because I'm very short, so I think about height a lot. Alternatively, you could have the P allele. This is where a mutation occurs, and maybe this expresses a different phenotype, and you can get taller, perhaps, if you had this mutation. If you have two separate alleles with two different nucleotides making them up, or separated nucleotides making up their allele structure, and they express the same phenotype, we refer to this as codominance, and I've represented this by a blue triangle here. So we have the Q allele that codes for a blue triangle, and the P allele codes for the blue triangle. Alternatively, you could have one allele, the P allele, for example, express itself as two different phenotypes. So you have a red circle and a black squiggly line, and we call this variable expressivity, because a single allele can have different phenotypes, different traits that manifest. In addition, I forgot to mention, but there is something called a locus. We use this term to represent where in the DNA, where in our cells this gene is typically residing. And for the cystic fibrosis gene, it's typically in the 7th chromosome of the long arm, which is represented by Q, and it is tallied at 31.2, and that's just a measure from a number, really, a quantity to measure from the centromere to the telomere, and it's somewhere in between those two at 31.2. Lastly, we will talk about briefly a model or formula that had been derived by scientists called Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium, and Hardy and Weinberg are their names. and it's p squared plus 2pq plus q squared. And I'm not going to go into too much detail here because there are too many assumptions that make this model a bit unrealistic, in my opinion, as a formula. Nonetheless, it is commonly tested, and essentially you find the frequency of a given allele. You can plug it into this formula. You can find the frequency of various different genotypes, which is important. And genotypes are the combination of alleles that you may have. Now, you could have Q and P, which is fine, but you could also have Q1 and Q2, which one might be dominant, one might be recessive. They might be both dominant, they might be both recessive. And this plays a big role in pedigrees and determining sex-based traits and so on and so forth. But I do not want to go into that for this video. So I will leave it there, and I'll see you guys in the next one.